light, no material, no time, nothing at all.
Yes.
Can you imagine such a thing?
You know, yes.
It's kind of hard to perceive as an imperfect being.
Yes.
You don't even know what you're talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
What are we talking about?
You were saying, imagine absolute darkness without God.
You're talking about nothing.
Huh?
We're talking about nothing.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, here's the point.
Well, nothing is
what we usually do
infinity,
is,
it's perfection.
like, if we took away all the atoms and all the molecules, you'd have, you'd say, well, you still have empty space, and scientists kind of think of empty space as being, you know, you can change shape and things, so it's kind of...
No, I'm saying it's nothing.
Then if you take away all the space...
No. I'm saying nothing. No space, no time, no light, no material, nothing. Anything that you can imagine,
It's a transcendent.
that is what that nothing is. Sorry, the converse of that is what the nothing is.
Yes. So my point is, we don't know that something can appear from that nothing.
Say again?
We don't know that something couldn't...
You believe in God.
Yes, if you guys want to discuss, if you don't mind, because the thing is I can't listen to two discussions at the same time.
We don't know that nothing, that something couldn't just appear out of that nothing. If it was the nature of the something.
I agree with you, and that is exactly my point. What I'm saying is the origin of this universe is not from nothing.
No, but I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying if you had your complete and utter nothingness, something might just suddenly appear.
How?
Because that's how things...
If something doesn't exist even, can it give rise to something?
Well, you're thinking that creation is always like a transitive verb, that A has to create B. It may be that A just creates itself, things just pop into
It's called cause and effect. Have you not heard of it?
I've heard of it, but what they say...
Everything that begins to
I can't
exist...
prove it, but...
Trust me, everything that begins to exist must have a cause.
Well,
the universe, according to the physicists, began to exist. Because they say that we were like a singularity, now there was a Big Bang, and everything, then the physical laws, and everything existing, the stars, and every matter, and light, and everything, energy, and everything originate from that singularity. But the point is, because it began to exist, it must have a cause.
They don't say that. Lots of people make this mistake. They think the Big Bang is there was nothing, and then suddenly, bang, there was
what was
something.
before the Big Bang? Let's see if you know.
There wasn't anything before. Well, we don't know, sorry, beg pardon. We don't know. Well, all we know is that there is a universe. It used to be much smaller. When it was really, really small, time would stop altogether. If you do some maths, it would be a thing called a singularity.
So you're agreeing with me? It did begin to exist?
No, it existed. It was just very small.
Are you saying it always existed or it began to exist?
No, always existed.
Okay, where's the evidence for that? No physicist ever says this.
No,
the reason the atheists make this up, it is actually speculation on their part, because there is no way you can provide evidence for an eternal universe.
And we've actually had this argument before, but if time stops...
What do you mean time stops?
If
time is a concept. What do you mean it stops?
No, I don't think time is a concept.
You don't think time is a concept? Do you think there's something that exists which you can say tangibly this is time?
Yeah, I think that there are satellites above our head, and because they're in a different gravity field, time runs slower.
Time still exists. Time still...
But it runs very slower, slightly slower than it does on Earth. You've heard this.
What does that prove?
It proves it can't just be a concept inside. When you say concept, I think of that something inside our mind. But our mind can't make
what I meant by concept is that it is basically a measure of a change from A to B.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So in your case, that is the gravity you're measuring. Okay? Because that is what time is. It is actually a measure of unit of a change in time, you can say. So even though you shouldn't use the definition.
Exactly, sir.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that when I'm saying that time stopped, sorry, what you're saying that time stopped or began to, the clock began to tick at some point, and that is the beginning of time. You know what? To me, that is not the beginning of time.
Yes, that's
because for you, that is the singularity, isn't it? Because as far as I'm concerned, the reason they say that is when the time began is because they cannot imagine beyond that.
No, they can imagine. They just
no, you can't. Beyond that. You can't imagine. Scientifically, you cannot imagine beyond that unless you want to just speculate.
You can't calculate.
It's called speculation.
But you're really agreeing with me, I feel. If time's the measure of things happening, if nothing was change. If there was no change, then basically there's no time.
But how do you know there was no change before the universe began?
We don't know that. We don't know
exactly. So you cannot say time began.
No. You can say as far as we know, time began. As far as we know.
As far as science knows,
yes.
You will say time started at the singularity. Am I right?
Yes.
Which is exactly what I was saying earlier. Because you see, science is in fact handicapped without space and time. Do you know why? Because without space and time, they cannot formulate any theories, postulate any any principles, perform any experiments, because science is limited in these factors of space and time. Without that, so because of this limitation, they will say that yes, we believe that time began from this point onwards, because we cannot imagine or see or postulate a theory beyond that. Point.
To be fair, that's not really true. They can postulate lots of theories. They can have a theory with 7 dimensions, a theory with 11 dimensions.
How is that without space and time? 7 dimensions.
And they could do.
Give me any theory that doesn't include space and time.
Yes, but what I'm saying.
You can't.
No.
The reason for that is because these are the limitations of science.
No. I could imagine a universe. I could do the maths for someone could do the maths for a universe where there was no time. You could do the maths.
Where there was no time. So you are agreeing with me there was a certain time when time did begin. So at one point there was no time, and then time began. And that point, and that time for you is the singularity. You are agreeing with me. Thank you very much. However, because science can only work on something that is physical, of a physical reality, and not the metaphysical. Yes. For example, let me ask you this: do you think consciousness exists?
It's a very different question.
Yes, it is. But I'm asking you about the metaphysical.
Yes, okay.
Like for example, look, take your things like your emotions. Take love, for example, or hatred. Yes, or even your own being as your consciousness. Yes. Do you really think science can somehow measure this?
Well, at the moment, we don't know what it is that happens in our brain, but we think consciousness, or I think it must be something inside your brain.
Do you think consciousness is matter?
It's matter.
It's material.
It's the consequences of matter. We keep saying no.
You're talking about brain. You know the MRIs and all these things, and you see the brain fluctuations. Yes. This is not your thoughts.
Well, how do you know?
I know because no scientist ever says that. That is what I'm looking at in my little screen. Your thoughts. This is your mind. Your mind fluctuates, and these different images that you see in the MRI.
You're saying mind. Do you mean brain?
Yes, your brain. Yes.
Okay,
so your brain and your nervous system. Yes, it has some electromagnetic pulses, and maybe you might be able to see this in this monitor. Yes. But for anyone to say I'm looking at your thoughts and I ask, okay, what am I thinking about? There's no scientist that can answer that.
Well, I would say it's different. They can't just scan your brain and know exactly what you're thinking, but they can see, like they show people pictures of things.
Of what?
I think it's sometimes like naked women or something, and they notice, oh, this part of your brain starts thinking.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's just impulses in your mind. So it doesn't mean. If
I looked at a naked woman and thought, I would call that a thought. Or if I saw a picture of an apple and I thought, that's nice, that would be a thought.
Yeah, but that's what
they can actually to an extent.
So what would they be understanding from that little fluctuation they see on the monitor when you think of an apple? Are you going to say, oh, it is beautiful or is it delicious? Which one of these thoughts?
Yeah, but that's...
No, answer the question. You see, this is something that scientists cannot answer.
Yes, I know, but you can't just say up to now. We've made a big advance. Now
it was an advancement.
No,
I'm talking about thought.
my friend.
No, I'm talking about thought, you're talking about impulses.
I know, but you're starting to talk over me. It gets kind of tiresome for me. If the thoughts that we have is something to do with the brain, in that we can, on a crude level, measure what we're thinking by looking at our brain.
All you're saying is different fluctuations. That's all. Fluctuations in the mind doesn't mean they can see your thoughts. I think you really have to connect the two, because in one thing, for example, if they have a device to check whether your heart is beating or not, yes, that I understand, because that is a mechanism that they are measuring. But you see, your consciousness and your thoughts are completely different. This is not something that is tangible and physical, which they can see, like your heart or the blood pumping through your veins.
I'll give you some arguments, maybe new arguments. The reason, this is a possibility that it's something immaterial, but the questions people always ask are the three big questions. One is, if this mind is immaterial, what's it made out of? What's this? There's no evidence for it. Is it made out of atoms or dark matter?
Are you over the brain or your mind as your consciousness?
Mind. You're talking about this immaterial kind of.
I'm talking about the immaterial.
Yes, immaterial.
Yes. What is it made of for you?
Well, see, I don't believe in it. Number two is...
You don't believe you have consciousness?
Number two is, when this immaterial body has a thought, how does it transfer that thought to your brain to cause you to do something? Because when I lift my hand, I have to get a signal from my brain, goes down my arm. And if the thought is, somewhere out here, my spirit, how does the spirit tell my brain to send?
We never said it was somewhere outside your body.
Okay.
You are assuming this.
Okay, but if it's immaterial.
But you have already fast forwarded from the point number one. You said, A, you don't believe in the mind. Did you not say that? Did you say you don't believe in the mind?
No, in immaterial. I don't believe in dualism.
Okay. Do you believe in consciousness?
Right. Yes, I believe in consciousness.
Is consciousness material or immaterial?
I think it's what we call an emergent property.
So what do you mean by that?
It's kind of like if you have a computer program, the hardware, that's material, and then the calculations that it does.
You mean the software is immaterial?
In a sense.
The software is still a program,
Yes.
So some programmer programmed the computer what to do based on the program you're running. So it's still, I wouldn't call it immaterial. Somebody physically typed the program, in order for it to function. So this is, what is a program? It's a set of instructions which is fed into the computer. I wouldn't call it immaterial, in a sense. So for you to say that this is like your consciousness is not something, in other words, you are somehow telling me that your consciousness is also material, not immaterial.
It's a good question, and it's a difficult question. I don't have a very good answer for it.
That is the reason it is called the hard question of consciousness.
Yes, I know. Yes, I know.
Because this is something that the scientists have struggled to answer, and they cannot answer. Because, to be honest with you, the reason they cannot answer is because, to me, science is a tool to understand and observe and measure our physical world.
Yes.
When you're using the wrong tool, then you will not get the response you're seeking. So to measure something which is metaphysical, which is beyond the physical world, it would be unfair to utilize science to probe into that. And that's the reason many people, they would actually spend years trying to understand this hard question of consciousness and still get no answer, because they have been using the wrong tool all along.
But there's two metaphysical questions. The first I was saying was, where's the interface? How does an immaterial spirit make a material body react? That's the hard question.
Just like the programmer programmed your body. We have something called the DNA in our body, which is called the code of life. Where do you think that came from? Nothing?
It's a completely different question.
No, it is. It is a program of your body, bro.
Okay.
It's not something completely different.
And then you're jumping through that question.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you to understand, using your own rationality, that something as complex as the DNA model and how it basically, how it programs every single cell in your body, how to function.
I'm going to ask you this question anyway. So one is, where's the interface between the immaterial and material? The other question is, if I take some drugs or something, it will alter my thoughts and my consciousness. So you would wonder, how kind of drug, does some chemical floating out in your brain affect something that's immaterial and separate from your...
It's not separate. No one says it's separate. That is where you're wrong. You see, for you to understand something that is spiritual, something that is immaterial, as a person who doesn't believe in the immaterial, it's not something easy to grasp, and I totally understand that. For you to keep saying it is separate is as if you understand it. No, you don't. Neither do I. How they basically interface with each other, I don't know. But the fact that we have consciousness, and there is a difference between beings which are conscious and beings which are basically, what do you say, inanimate? There's a big difference between the two. Yes? Because, you know, when you actually look at a nail which is immaterial, which doesn't have consciousness, and you use a hammer to hammer the nail will not experience this fear of being harmed and move away, like an animate object would do. Yes? And that shows us that there are beings which acknowledge and understand that it exists. To me, that is what consciousness is. To be aware of your existence, to be self-aware of your existence is what consciousness is. Are you self-aware that you exist?
Do you want to hear like an argument against that, or a problem with that?
Go on.
I mean, I see where you're coming from. The problem is, you know, when you look at animals, you start thinking, well, a flower that can bend in the, you know, turn towards the sun. But I wouldn't say a daisy had consciousness in the same way that I have consciousness.
No, but they have a different kind of consciousness.
As you go up through the ladder, there seems to be a progression where animals become more and more conscious, and that makes me think that it's something that evolved, but it's not something that's completely
This is something
unique.
within the DNA.
It's not so unique to us.
And that is why I was telling you, I was pointing you to the DNA. The DNA code is there within the plant as well. So when you see the sunflower turning towards the sun, it is coded within the sunflower to perform that action whenever the sun comes out. So it's basically a stimulation to the environment, and this is coded in the DNA of the sunflower. Just like when you go on a holiday, so when Andy goes to somewhere like a nice like Spain or somewhere, you tan because it is coded within your body to react to the environment. So you're adapting, your skin is adapting to protect itself, and this is what happens. So for you to say that all this just happened by chance, to me that is like saying you believe in fairy tales in science, that all this just came about. Even though you say you believe in science, to me it seems like this is some magic fairy tale which you believe in, that all this just existed one day.
I mean, certainly DNA, that's entirely material.
I agree.
Okay, right, okay.
Yeah, but it didn't come by itself.
Oh, you're saying like where did the first strand of DNA come from?
No, not the first DNA strand even. What I'm saying is that everything that you see within yourself and within the universe, I see that someone is behind this, who's caused all this to happen. It didn't just pop into existence one day. Because to me, to believe that is something to believe in fairy tales. And this is exactly what, unfortunately, what the atheists and the agnostic somehow are leading into or falling into. Because to say that nothing can create something, that itself is a fallacy. I know you don't believe that, but you have already said that nothing cannot create something. Yes, am I right? I mean, correct me if I'm misquoting you, but generally, anyone who believes that something can come from nothing really doesn't understand what nothing is. To me, nothing is not. It's something that doesn't even exist. It's like infinity. Do you believe infinity exists? The opposite of nothing.
See, again, you actually don't know. I mean, it's possible that space is infinite.
No, everything has a limit. You can't say space is infinite just because you think so. You see, the universe is expanding. Yes. The fact that it is expanding shows us there's a limit to it. Yes. At one point it was a singularity, and now it is expanding. So anyone who says the universe is infinite doesn't understand the meaning of the universe or the concept. You see what I mean? Yeah.
Sorry, the question was, is anything infinite?
Yeah. No, I asked, is infinite reality? Is it real or is it a concept? The reason mathematicians use terms like zero and infinity is to communicate better the ideas and the equations that they formulate. You see, this is something that they have in fact invented, I would say, in order to communicate better the ideas and the concepts.
A mathematician would say that zero, you can't really do math without zero. Zero is a real thing.
What do you mean it's a real thing? I thought numbers were abstract. How can you call it a real thing?
Yes, I think, I'm not a mathematician, but I think
you don't need to be a mathematician to know numbers abstract. It's a reality. These are things which we have basically, I would say, invented in order for us to communicate better, in order for us to have a more organized.
You're not good at answering my question.
Which is what?
Just go ask you one. And I'm sorry, now I don't know my question. What were we talking about?
I think we talk about infinity and nothing.
The thing about numbers, I mean, these are interesting questions. The thing I always feel about numbers is that if they were just a human construct, then we could sort of change them at will.
We do.
But,
we do.
I mean, obviously we can.
If you look around, the numbers are written differently by different people.
I know, but that's just the symbols. But the actual things that the numbers refer to, we can't change them at will. You know, one and one is all. You can write one any way you want, but one and one is always.
I'm sure at one point there were no fractions. There were just whole numbers. Yes. So we invented then fractions. At one point maybe there were no negative numbers, so we invented negative numbers. But what I'm trying to tell you is that if you think all these things are just material and just, you need to understand that there are abstract things which we utilize.
But see, this one, the question was, if numbers are a human construct, why can't we change the laws of maths to suit ourselves?
How do you mean? You mean can number 1 or number 0 be written some other way?
No, that's just writing them down. But can 1 and 1 make 3 or something?
Oh, I see what you mean.
More money, you know?
Well, you know,
if I could put £10 in my pocket, £10 of this, and I had £50, that would be good.
Yeah, but if look,
I'm
is that
limited by the laws?
The reason, no, you're not limited by the law of maths in that. You're limited by logic then. Because if you're going to say 1 and 1 is going to make 3, then it must make sense to you logically that this is 3. You see what I mean? So both abstract and reality, you still have to employ logic.
Yes.
So the concept of logic, for you to employ logic is quite important for you to have a rational understanding of things.
So logic, is that a human construct or is that real?
You know, I think all these things, I personally believe that these things were inevitable for human beings to discover. Okay? So everything that we discover in our life is something that is inevitable. All it does is sometimes we discover things quite early on in our history, and sometimes it takes ages. Sometimes we forget and we rediscover it. This is human life.
If we're discovering it, it's something that's always there outside of us.
Of course we do, yes.
Yes, but I think what you were saying was that maths wasn't something that exists outside of ourselves.
No, I said maths was abstract.
Okay.
Because you are somehow thinking it is something like the rules of physics. Yes, rules. You know the rules of. No, I'm talking about the rules of physics. Take gravity, for example. Yes, gravity was discovered at some point.
Yes.
But it always existed. You see what I mean?
Yes.
But again, if I asked you, do you see gravity? Yes, you will say no. Can you actually? Do you think gravity is something immaterial or material?
Well, you see, say it was like a phenomenon.
Well, it's again something which you find in your physical world, which we can measure, yes, and which we know about. But if somebody is going to ask me, is it material? I would say no, it's not. It is something that defines your physical world, yes, just like you are defined by your consciousness.
I'm defined by my consciousness.
Yes, unless you're telling me that, you know, do you think your existence is a reality? Or are you like Mansoor uses this example quite often, and I find it quite interesting. Are you, maybe you could be a brain sitting in a jar somewhere outside Speaker's Corner, but just that brain has been stimulated for Andy to imagine that this world really exists. You might be in a matrix, who knows? You see what I mean?
No.
So the question, this question about your consciousness is something quite fundamental for you to acknowledge yourself first. If you're going to acknowledge yourself first, that you exist,
then you can actually think about the world that you live in.
Yes, but see, your consciousness, I mean, I could exist if I had an immaterial body. Maybe I am an immaterial body, and everything that happens is just some thoughts.
No, but you're not immaterial.
I don't think that's
exactly,
true.
yeah. So let's not ponder over things which are obvious.
No, but I thought you were the person that believes.
No, I asked you. Yeah, that's.
Spirit thing.
You see, the connection I made there was with regards to your consciousness.
Yeah.
It's quite important. So even though you might be materially present here, but your consciousness makes you imagine all these things.
Well,
you might be a robot who thinks that you're a human being. You know, I can think of 100 examples of what your real material is made of. Who knows? But all that could be your imagination. Or my imagination. Who knows? But what I'm saying is this: there are certain things which we observe and which we interpret as real. There are other things which we know exist, but we cannot differentiate whether they're material or immaterial. Like your consciousness, like gravity, like things like your emotions, love, hatred, I don't know, all these things. So these things, like I said, you cannot utilize science to measure things which are immaterial.
I wouldn't agree.
Sorry, when I say immaterial, I mean
because gravity, you can certainly measure gravity.
Yeah, but the thing is, you know, gravity, you can think that gravity is higher or lower, but if I asked you what does it look like, what is it, what does it consist of, what is it made of, you can't answer those questions. You see what I mean? We know there is a force which is called gravity, and this force is an active force. However, this is something. This is something that you see when you ask. For example, if I asked you about your body, yes, science will give you 10 different answers. That what your anatomy is made of. Yes, because they can actually see this, they can observe it, they know what you are made of in terms of your material, physical existence. But when I ask science questions like, can you ask any scientist to tell me what you're thinking of, or how much love you are experiencing towards your mother or your wife or your girlfriend or whatever it is, these questions they cannot answer because this is something that is beyond the scope of science.
Well, here's what I feel is, I mean, obviously it's not something I know a lot about, but I know there's people that already can put implants on their head and then they can have a thought and that thought transmit to the implant.
They're not looking at a thought, they're looking at the impulses in your brain. That's all they're looking at.
Yes, but hang on.
So brain activity doesn't mean they're looking at your thoughts. Trust me. No scientist can look at an MRI or any sort of
we did this, but
exactly.
What I'm saying is they can in a crude way. In a crude way they can send their thoughts out.
Not even crude.
In a material way, and they can look at your thoughts in a material way.
I think you're living in a sci-fi world if you think that. Honestly, what do you really have to understand?
Well,
it's a difference
because you believe in the soul.
No, but you believe what you're just telling me is science fiction. It's not even science.
No.
Are you seriously telling me there are scientists out there who can put probes in your brain and look at your thoughts? Seriously, this is Doctor Who, man.
No, they're working on it with AI. Yeah,
well, AI is not different. AI is just a set of programs. That's all it is.
Yeah, like I say, they can.
If anyone can provide evidence of any scientist looking at someone's thought, that guy will get not only a Nobel Prize but get much more acknowledgement than that.
Yeah. I mean, I think
so please don't speculate things you don't know.
Well,
because you're doing that, Andy. You're telling me that looking at brain activity, somehow they're looking at thoughts. No, they're not. They're two different things. One is electromagnetic impulses that your brain cells are firing, and the other is no. That's what you think. Thoughts. Look. When you are dreaming, yes. Do you really think scientists can tell you what you're dreaming about?
No, but
they can't.
You keep laying down the law about things.
I'm not laying. I'm asking you for evidence.
Okay.
Provide me evidence from the scientific world where anyone has said I can see your thoughts. Because you're looking at science fiction right now and not science.
I'm sure there was this experiment a long time ago. I'll have to look it up. They showed pictures. That was it. So they showed pictures of naked women to people, and then they had some people who were homosexual and some people who were straight, and they noticed that the homosexuals, the part of the brain that lit up didn't light up.
Which is exactly what I'm telling you.
Yes.
That's
and
brain
what
activity.
You're saying, but what's the point of that brain? Sorry, actually, can I stop? That's not a good example. I'll go back to another one. If I drink wine, like my thoughts can change, my mood. I think that would count part of my soul.
If you drink wine,
my thoughts can change.
if you drink wine, that is not an experiment to know your thoughts.
Well, no,
You're changing the goalpost. I'm asking, can a scientist,
Yes, I know.
view your thoughts?
Everyone knows that they can't so far.
So let's stick to that then.
Okay.
Don't give me science fiction.
Yes, I know. They can't plug something in and up on the screen comes every single thing you're thinking.
Not even a single thing. Forget about every single thing.
Well,
they cannot even imagine, trust me, if they stuck probes on your brain or in your head, and you ask them what you're thinking, yes, by chance, by chance, even a soothsayer, yes, even this so-called fake fortune tellers will tell you what you're thinking by chance. Yes, they can. I'm not saying no. But if you ask them, can you provide evidence that is exactly what I'm thinking? Maybe out of 100 things, yes, they can somehow speculate and get it correct even. Maybe a couple of things, I don't know. All I'm saying is that there is no evidence, scientifically speaking, that anyone can see your thoughts.
Yes,
That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
So let's not say if, maybe, but, future, past, whatever. No, let's stick to what we know.
Yes.
And that's the reason you need to understand consciousness is something beyond the scope of science. You can say no, provide evidence for your knowledge.
This is our state of knowledge. We know that a lot of what we call thought streams, something's happening inside our brain when we think of things, and we can alter our thoughts by adding different chemicals to our brain.
Things are getting heated up. Anyway, Andy, nice speaking to you. I think it's been a long conversation. I have to go to pray. You're not going to shake my hand.
I am, but I'm annoyed that you cut me off in the middle.
I didn't cut you off. I gave you like how many? More than an hour.
No.
I think we're going around in circles. Okay? All I'm saying is that I need to go to pray. It's time for my prayer. And that's why I need to go. But it's been nice talking to you. And thanks for your time.
I actually quite enjoyed our conversation.
You can have a look on the channels. Maybe take the names.
All right.
Maybe ponder on what we talked about.
Yes, maybe I'll make an atheist of you.
Say again?
Maybe I'll make an atheist of you.
You make an atheist of me? Well, I think that's a tough call, but you're welcome to try. Right.